Hello and welcome everybody to another edition of the Buy Round Interview Show. Today we are joined by a former Premiership winning coach, a current head coach of the NRL team, the St George Illawarra Dragons, Coach Shane Flanagan, and also panellist on the Rugby League Roundtable, which I'm sure you're very proud about as well, Shane. Excellent contribution. You kept Woodsy and Reedy in check as well, so it was very nicely done.
No, thanks, James. It was a fun experience. Dealing with Reedy was always going to be difficult, but I enjoyed it.
It was fun. The Dragons season 2025. There's been plenty of player movement. Do you anticipate any more ins and outs before the season kicks off?
Yeah, well, there hasn't been a lot of movement at our place, just probably two big ones, in Zach Lomax and Ben Hunt. But, we've had some real positive new recruits in, Valentine Holmes, which was done sort of nearly halfway through last season. And then, recently Gutho and Damien Cook at the back end of, the season last year. So three really big ins for us. People might say some big outs as well, but the Zach one happened before the season started, so we always knew what was going to happen there, and we could plan for it. Ben was, I think, just a decision made in the best interest of both parties. So he'll move on, and we'll definitely move on. And for our perspective, we've got two spots left in our top 30, and we'll look to fill. Definitely one before Christmas and one after. And, as you said, it's been plenty of movement. The football NRL season never stops anymore. It used to basically stop for a little while after grand final, but now definitely not. It's just such a big beast, and it goes for 12 months.
Do you have a position in mind for spots? Well, they wouldn't be spots 29 and 30, but those last two spots is position specific? Yeah,
definitely a half. We're not too worried whether it's a genuine 7 or more of a 6. We feel that Kyle can play both positions. I feel that he can organise as well, but it all depends. I'd like to think that we have a bit of a yin and yang in our halves, which I thought worked reasonably well last year with Ben Hunt. He's more of a runner, can just take the line on when he needs to, and his organisation skills are there, but Kyle can take a lot of pressure off him there. So we just got to make sure that we get the right half or 6, and it doesn't really, for me, it's never really worried what sort of half, what number they have on their back. It's 7 or 6. They've just got jobs to do, and it's more jobs based around their skill set. Don't try and make him into Nathan Cleary if they've got number 7 on them, or don't try to make him into a Jerome Luai if they're a number 6. We just got to look at their skill set, and we'll put a number on them to match.
Yeah, I'm going to ask you about the Lomax and the Ben Hunt stuff, because obviously they're huge contributors to the points scored for the Dragons last year. But one of the guys you didn't mention is Nathan Lawson. Mm-hmm. What attracted you to him? He's the Australian Sevens player.
Yeah,
came from a little bit left field. What attracted to him, and what can the NRL fans expect from him?
Yeah, I probably didn't include Nathan because he's still with Rugby Australia.
He's still...
he's in Dubai at the moment. I think they play China this weekend in the quarterfinals. So. He's got maybe a week or two left to go with Union, and then, touch wood that he comes back with no injuries and he can start with us. What attracted me to him, he's a local Shire boy. We went to school with Cam Murray, and I think it was Trinity they went to, and a few other boys that he's been around football. He hasn't actually played in a rugby league at any major level. He has played, junior rugby league, but... been most of the time in the union space and most of the time in the sevens. And, if you get 5 minutes or 10 minutes, just jump on to Nathan Lawson YouTube and have a look at some of the tries, and more for me about his athletic ability, being able to jump, run, a big body. He's 6'2", and he's aggressive the way he plays the game, and I just think the transition. He's a smart kid, and when I've spoken to him a few times, I just feel that he understands football, rugby league, and he'll adapt to it pretty well. We look at the Will Warbricks of the world.
Yeah.
It took Will maybe 12 months to, and then he's probably second year just went up another level, and we see how good he is. And I just see Nathan on that same path, big, athletic, and a footy player.
Do you enjoy that aspect of coaching? Because there's multiple parts to it, the media, the X's and O's, the first grade, the pathways, but having almost like a project player.
No, it is exciting. Imagine if we can get him into be that type of player, an NRL player. He's local. He's from me anyway. He's from Cronulla. So I've known a bit about him for a while and ran into him a few times. So it's really exciting to be able to get this raw, excitable young footballer and mould him into an NRL player if we can. So exciting times.
You think he'll play NRL next year, or is that a bit too ambitious? Like season 2025?
I reckon he will.
Yeah.
Yeah, I reckon he will. He'll be with us the first week of December. Already, this is the type of person he is. He gets sent. He's been asked to be sent every training session, so he watches all our all our field sessions, all our wrestle sessions, anything we do, which these days we video. He gets all of them, and he studies them while he's away in Dubai playing seven. So that's the type of player we're getting and the dedication we're getting. So exciting.
It is. I often, like, when I look at someone like Will Warbrick or look at athletes in other codes, think like they'd be a great league player, but it's obviously, we've got Carter Gordon going up to the Titans and a few coming across from union backgrounds. It's really interesting to see how they transition into our sport. We've seen Sualihi go the other way, and obviously he's got that rugby background, but union boys coming to league, it's there's obviously some raw talent there, like you say.
Yep.
And with that sort of attitude, I'm excited to see what he brings to the table.
Yeah, probably is more so we can get highlight packages sent to you, which we get hundreds of them per week. Of young kids, 15-year-olds, 16-year-olds, rugby union players, from different countries as well, sent to you. The thing that probably excited me about Nathan was how aggressive he was defensively.
Yeah.
And especially in sevens, like he chased tackles and he wanted to get involved in them, and he was aggressive. A couple of times he chased kicks down, and he just didn't tackle the opposition player. He got hold of him and dragged him back into the in goal. So those little pieces that you just pick up on a player's attitude, I liked. And then you see the tries that he scored. You just sort of picture him in a red and white jersey running down the sideline doing that sort of stuff.
Mate, you said there that you get sent multiple, clips of individuals. Mm-hmm. Like who and why, and are they sending them to the club, or is it through an agency? Like how does all? I guess that's a side of the sport that most people would be unaware of, that you can just send your highlights package to the Dragons and head coaches and hope for the best.
Yeah, well, we get them I get them from seriously 14, 15-year-olds, whether they're from the individual or the family or the agent. There's so many different people they could come from, and they send them through to you. And, obviously, from a junior level, I basically just forward them on to our recruitment thing, and then every now and again, some of them get pushed back to me that, hey, you need to have another look at this one. But there is a lot per week. There's a lot of players out there in multiple sports, rugby league, rugby union, athletics, that think they can make it in the NRL, which is a good thing. It's about our game.
Well, that's what I'm thinking. Like it's obviously now the NRL is seen as the sort of the pinnacle of Australian sport. And if you're obviously we want to, have a return on investment or be able to monetize your athletic ability. And it seems as though the way to do that here in Australia, rather than, the 400 meters, the 1500, the 100, it's like, well, no, let's put that money into, let's put this athletic ability into the NRL. It's the same over in in the States, like athletics in its purest form, there's only really one person that wins the 100 meters that can monetize that ability to run the 100 in 9.8. So if you're not going to do that and you've got that speed, well, you go to the NFL.
Yeah.
Like speed is a valuable attribute.
Yep.
Like let's monetize it through NFL.
Yeah, and the NRL's got such a profile now that I think, maybe when I was growing up, the union was sort of, I wouldn't say it was on par, but I think a lot of young football players, I'll just put them in the football players category, whether it's union or league, go, well, if I don't make it here or, there's definitely an option, I wouldn't mind trying the NRL.
Yeah.
And so they don't just say, I'm playing rugby union or I'm playing rugby league. I think this changeover from rugby league to rugby union is less. Yeah, obviously Joseph is a high-profile one, but I think, it's a good thing for rugby league. I think it's coming more our way now. A lot of, the athlete or the football player is coming across. And, you might know more about rugby union than I do, but I think it's not all rugby union players could make the transition.
Yeah, I would agree with that.
Especially probably middle forwards and they're probably, what I see is there's some big athletes in union and I don't know whether they'd be mobile enough. Maybe they could make the transition with the training and so on, but they'd have to come pretty early in their career. You couldn't get them at 26, 27.
Yeah, it's a very different skill set, the prop forward in rugby union to the prop forward in rugby league. It's a completely different skill set. Just finishing up on that recruitment and retention recruitment, the Ben Hunt situation, going back 18 months, you got the job at the Dragons, and it seemed as if item number one at the top of the to-do list was sort out the situation with your captain, your highest paid player, your number 7 that had put in a release request. I can remember looking at that and going, it is Shane's number one job to do. You managed to sort it out. What changed in those? Well, sorry, you managed to convince him, not even convince him to stay, but you shut down talk of him leaving 12 months ago, 18 months ago. What changed in those 12 months?
Yeah, well, to explain that period, you're exactly right. I needed to get to Ben, which I did pretty early, and see if I could resolve some of the issues that he was having. And I think I did. We never had an argument. We never had any heated debates. We got on pretty well the whole season. Oh, sorry, we did get on well the season, and then. But I think Ben. Had a good relationship with Anthony Griffin, and he was pretty disappointed when Anthony Griffin was terminated, and I just don't know if he got over that. And then there were some other things that sort of just annoyed Ben through the period of time. And then, we went okay, and maybe winning glossed over a few things. And, Ben just sort of, to his credit, he sort of got on with it. And then at the last bit of the season, not just Ben, but the whole team just sort of fell in a heap with 3 games to go. And, we had a chance to make the semis and we didn't get there. And I just feel that Ben, that sort of was just the icing on the cake. He felt that, he was held responsible, which he wasn't. Probably brought everything to a tipping point again. And, some of the stuff that happened in the media, which players sometimes can't manage. Coaches can't manage. It just gets out of hand, and I think in the end, for me, I just needed my captain was out there. He was within the Australian team, and there was some messaging coming back that he wasn't overly happy being at the Dragons, and I don't want someone, whether it's Ben, whether it's any player, number 30 or number 1, if they don't want to be there, well. There's not much use happening there. So I think in the end it was a good decision from the club, and Ben agreed with it, and we just both moved on, and in 3 months, 6 months' time, it'll all be forgotten, and we'll just got to get on with it.
Yeah, I guess obviously it's quality player. Yep. He was the top try assister in the NRL last year. Once that news come that he wanted to go again, was there anything for you that you wanted to try and convince him to stay? or had it got to a point where it was just like we need to cut our losses, or even starting to affect the other members of the squad, and which, you know, it's a fine balance, because we think of player power. I just want to release a go. Well, I don't know if we can have a policy like that. I don't know if we can have the policy of where the club don't want you anymore, they can just move you on.
Yeah.
So it is a fine balance, but when it becomes almost not untenable, but when it's starting to affect other people within the group, that's where you've got to make a decision as a club and as a coach. Like, we're gonna part ways.
Yeah, exactly right. And it was affecting a lot of people. You know, I'm sure it was affecting Ben and his wife and, you know, his family, his mum and dad. And it wouldn't have been, you know, no one likes to see themselves, you know, in the paper for all these negative reasons. I would put them down. And definitely from our club perspective, it was, you know, took a lot of my time up and took a lot of the staff's time up. And,
a bit of a drain on resources.
A drain on people, you know, like what's happening. And a lot of people coming to me and going, you know, what's happening with Ben? And then I look at the players and I was going, well, you know, probably half of them are going, is our captain going to be here? Is our halfback going to be here? And you shouldn't, I don't feel that we needed that. So, you know, as I went before, we just needed to make a decision, because wasn't a good environment to wonder whether our captain, our leader, our highest paid player, all that type of stuff, one, wants to be here, or two, is he going to be here from? So we made a decision to move on, and, you know, I think Ben will be happier and we'll move on as a club.
When things are reported and arguably embellished, or, you know, not reported truthfully, like, you know, the talk of a heated debate in the player review, end of season review, which all players have, and I've been part of some debates myself. Like, it's only natural, you know, that the coach may have one idea, the player may have another. You take criticism. Some people take it well. Some people don't take it well. But when it was sort of portrayed in a way that I'm assuming you, and I've spoke to you before, that it wasn't how it was. No. The actual factual nature of that meeting, it was portrayed in a different light. As a coach, when you're sat there and you're reading this, how do you react and digest that?
Yeah, it's frustrating. You know, people to say that they got information out about the review. The review was done with one other coach and Ben, and, you know, the information that got out wasn't that, in fact, what happened. People could presume that, you know, they were very broad in their comments about, you know, Ben's defence was questionable in the last month. Well, hey, we all watched that.
Yeah.
You know, anyone can see that he didn't have his best games defensively, but, you know, he was the leading, you know, try assist, and he, you know, led us well during the whole year. But they were frustrating because that wasn't the case. It wasn't heated debate. You know, I'm sure if I had a review with you, you wouldn't sit there and just cop all my, whether it was criticism, probably you know, deal with the praise and what you did well this year. But and Ben was exactly the same. You know, he listens and he's had an opportunity to give feedback, and what we did well, what I did well, what he did well. That's how we grow as an organisation and individuals. If we sit there and pat each other on the back, we're not going to get any better. So we have to be open and honest, and that's what we were. And there was no debate, there's no arguments. It was just, you know, 2 men or 3 men having a discussion about how we can get better, what wasn't that good during the year, how can we help him get better, what do we need to do, and so on. So, yeah, it was frustrating to read reports that a lot of that stuff went on that it didn't.
Yeah. Back to the start of this season, the Dragons, unfairly so in my opinion, were favourites for the wooden spoon. I loved your response from the very get-go. Yep. Paraphrasing here, but we're not going to win the wooden spoon.
Yeah.
So what I'm thinking about the coaches that have been under that similar traits to you. It's not said by accident. I don't think it was a throwaway line. I kind of feel like you meant something by that. Like, I love that response. Like, no, we're not.
Yeah. I've coached long enough, you know, 20-something years, you know, 10 years as a head coach. You know, we're not going to get, we weren't going to get it last year. We're not going to get it in 2025. Absolutely no chance. You know, when you got to believe in your ability, you got to believe in your players. I know that I've got a good footy team. I got a better footy team in 25 than I had in 24. Hopefully in 26 I've got a better one again, and that's about building a football team, and that's or footy club. And when you've done it for a while, you actually you know your capabilities. I know my coaches that I've got in place are going to be better again this year. The players are going to be better. Where we started at as our pre-season is so different to where we started last year. We baby steps last year, probably till Christmas. Now we're straight into it. We're into our systems and our processes. Week one, there's some young kids there, but they'll catch up. And, when you add a few class players, and the Gutherson, Cooks and Val and them, we can start at another level.
When you say something like that, are you speaking to the players or are you speaking to the fans?
Both.
Yeah.
I'd speak both like that to the players, which I have, that our starting point this year is a lot higher. I expect it to be a lot higher, and I think they do as well as the ones that have been around a bit, that, we're not, doing, some basic stuff about lines and angles and plays and, combinations and so on. We're starting at a lot higher level, and, our fans should be excited about that.
Yeah. I just, going back to that comment of like, hey, we're not going to win the wooden spoon. Like, I'm thinking as with both hats on, fan and player, like to hear your coach say that.
Yep.
It fill you with optimism, fill you with confidence.
Last year I thought, it's hard for me to go out there and, a lot of the, there's 17 rugby league teams in there, a lot of supporters, and, there's probably a lot of Dragons supporters that go, he's kidding himself. But, I thought last year we could make the semi-finals. Hey, we were really close. Bar win one more game, we finish in the 8. That's how close we were, and we had a chance to do it in the last 3 weeks, and we bombed it. Did we, over exceed our expectations? No. I expect every time I go out to play, I expect to win. Where we finish next year, I'm not quite sure, but we're going to climb the mountain.
Yeah, just on that last year, you got yourself into a position that the finals were in your own hands. Like the destiny was there, and I was on NRL.com doing my ladder predictions, and I was thinking, Dragons are going to play the Dogs, and it's going to be it's going to be sold out. It's going to be an amazing week one of finals. It didn't transpire that way.
Yep.
From the Dragons' point of view, what happened in those last 3 weeks? For a lot of that group, the last time they played finals, 2018. Was it nerves? Was it fatigue?
We've had a look at it a fair bit, James, but the game against Parramatta,
that was insane.
It was crazy.
It was crazy.
It was two sides where Parramatta had nothing to lose and went out and just played a little bit of football.
Because they were in the predicament of, if they won, it didn't matter. If they lost, it didn't matter. They were all about the spoon bowl that was the following week. Yeah.
So we had the game against Parramatta, and Jacob Little, our hooker, who played every game nearly for us. I think he missed one with a HIA. His wife had a baby at lunchtime, and we had a 3 o'clock game. So obviously he missed that game, and Connor Maholson that came in did a really good job. Didn't miss any tackles, did his job, and I was really pleased for him to get an opportunity. But I think that played a little bit on the boys' mind in the lead up to it. Is he playing? Is he not playing? And then, some of our better players just didn't play well in that game. And for me, I think looking back at it, they thought they were just going to go there and win that football game, and had no focus defensively. And we were poor. Like, to let 40 points in, if you think you're going to play semi-finals with 2 weeks to go and you're letting 40 points in with a side that's down the bottom, there's something wrong about your attitude and mentality about defence. We scored 40 as well, but you can't let in 40.
If the Dragons are in that position again this year, do you back them all being equal in terms of like the fitness levels, in terms of the health levels of the roster? Do you back them to take that destiny in their own hands and play finals. Like, do you think the group has learned that lesson?
Yeah, I think they have. I think you learn a little bit. The group learns a little bit about me and the coaching staff, and what I learn out of that. That you can't take your foot off the pedal with this playing group. I know going through periods of time, I could take my foot off the pedal when I was at the Sharks. When I had the Mick Inneses and Gals and Luke Lewis and Wade Grahams, Andrew Feeders, like I could take my foot off some weeks that Gal and senior players drove the attitude and competitiveness. They were all competitive. They would seriously fight over 5 cent piece, especially if it was money, a lot of those boys. But they would fight for anything. Maybe this group, we just haven't got that killer instinct last year. I think we'll have it this year. We're going to compete really hard, and we've got to find that killer instinct moving forward.
And is that about just having those, I guess, the people that don't need that constant reminder of what it's like to play NRL at that 7, 8, 9 out of 10 each and every week? But I guess some players need that, like, okay, here's a focus area, or guys, look, we know this situation. We know Power have got nothing to play for, but that doesn't change our defensive principles. Yep. Like, that doesn't change our attitude to defence. Let's make us really difficult to play against, really difficult to break down, and we'll take care of business. But I think some players and some groups need that constant reminder. They need to be brought back to attention, brought back to focus. Where some, like you say, that time at the Sharks, you trust those players to drive those standards and have those conversations with each other on the ones that maybe do start to drift a little.
Yeah, I always have a little bit of a, in my own mind, try and think about that team that I was talking to you about, the Sharks, that if I didn't go to a training session or if I didn't go to the game, I reckon they'd nearly get the job done without me. That's how senior and experienced that group were. Now, if I didn't go to a team meeting, so if I didn't go to the Dragons the Dragons team meeting the day before the game against Parramatta, and I just put a video camera in there and I watched that group, I think I'd struggle to even who's going to talk.
Yeah.
What's the messaging going to be?
Who's going to grab control?
Who's going to be the leaders in that group? I think I would struggle. Obviously, we everyone to go to Ben, but it just can't be Ben, and that wasn't Ben's best subject. He was more about follow me when I get on the field. But I'd be really surprised if there was anyone stood up and we got some really good conversation in that team meeting if it was just players compared to other sides that I've had. But next year, now I'm going to have Damien Cook, Clint Gutherson. Val's not a talker, but he's an action man. And then a lot of other players that have had this experience now of we had an opportunity and we blew it. So now when it comes around again, hey, we're not blowing it. Even the quieter ones in my football team, they all know your NRL career is pretty short when you look at it and it goes quick, that you can't let opportunities slip like we had last year. So I think if we ever get in that position again, even my quietest ones that don't talk up will be going, hey, boys, we've been here before. We've got to do A, B, C better. And that'd start the conversation. And, I think we're all more in line and more mature for what's happened to us last year.
I think that would be a great experiment for any coach to run. For a training session, your field sessions at, say, 8 o'clock, you do all your strap and your prep, go back in the changing room, just say wait, and just see what the players do. I'm sure it's being done.
I've learned off Craig Bellamy one time. I went down to Melbourne because I was doing the Origin with him, and I went down to Melbourne to meet him, and apparently I spoke to a couple of the boys from Melbourne, and they said, oh, yeah, I think you got him at a bad time because he walked off training yesterday, and just said, stuff you, I'm out of here, and you can do it yourself because they weren't training anything. I did it at the Sharks once or twice, and we weren't training well, so I just walked off. Just went to the dressing sheds and, do it yourself, solve the problem yourselves. Did they solve it? Well, yeah, once again, we had senior players there that, probably Gal would say, hey, we're probably better off without him. And Mick Guinness would definitely say that.
Yeah.
Let's just get on. But if I did that at the Dragons last year, I think I would have a problem. They'd probably all look around and go, well, what do we do now? But now my group's a little bit more experienced, even the players were there, and then we've added this, sprinkled in some really experienced players that they'd get it done without the coach, and which leads you because onto the game. I'm not out there; they're going to make decisions on their own. So it's all about education and experience,
and almost taking control.
Yeah.
And I'm thinking back to a session like that. What I'd be like, it'd be almost like, well, if it doesn't matter, right? Let's this is what I know what we'd usually do, like in terms of how long it would go for or what's required of the group. Let's go.
Yep.
Or even, in that dressing room just waiting for training. It's like how long do we wait for?
Yeah, that's James Graham experience. James Graham.
Yeah.
But, when in your early days and before you played rep footy and all that, maybe you're.
Yeah, 100%. I would have looked to the other senior guys to go,
well, what's next? So what do we do now? Do we pack up and go home as well? And we just get the ball out and play a bit of kick tennis, or we play touch footy? What do we do here? So
I'm trying to think. It probably depend on what mood I was in. But it could be like, oh, well, if the coach is near, like, boys, he said 8:30, he's not here, must be a day off.
Yeah.
We're going home. Or actually, we need to get some practice. We'll just run it ourselves.
As a coach, I've always, when I come through, I probably had, talk about coaches that have, a long background of coaching. When I first started, I did my knee in my last year of my career for Parramatta, and then Parramatta just rolled me into coaching. Said, you got another year here, just coach, and we'll see how you go. And I had Brian Smith there for like 8 years, and Smithy was a real good educator. He was from that school teacher model, and used to come to our training and stand on the side, and then give you tips. Hey, that was a really good session, or that was a good block, or hey, some of your players weren't listening to you. Maybe you could change it this way. It was too long, too short, whatever it may be. So I got a lot of education there, and then. You draw back onto your playing career. I had Warren Ryan, I had Mick Cronin, Craig Young, John Baylor. Had some really good coaches, all different styles, Roy Masters, but you draw back on that. And then, going through my coaching career, then I went to the Roosters after Brian Smith with Ricky Stewart. So Ricky is about motivation and, being fit and strong, and he's a real motivator. And, he had a senior playing group, which I reckon I had at the Sharks later in my career. And so I got a lot out of that. Working with Craig Bellamy in Origin, you get a bit of those type of people. But what I always do is watch other people, especially body language. And, I see what, Wayne, like I don't think Wayne would... One of my mentors was Ron Massey, and Ron Massey and Wayne were really good mates. And Mass used to always tell me that, don't overcoach him. And I reckon, Wayne looks at his players and he doesn't overcoach them. He gives them enough. They're there in first grade because they've got some talent. Don't overcoach them, coach them, but don't overcoach them. So it's a tricky one, but I think, you've got to manage whether they're senior players and, what do I need to give James Graham when he's 33 years old, 34 years old? What do I need? What's he want from me?
Is that part about giving people the skill set to make the right decision, not telling them this is the decision to make or this unit, whether you're a middle, whether you're a right edge, left edge, we're going to give you the fitness, we're going to give you a basic plan, but we're going to back you to make the decision. In this situation, it's this, or we would think this. But if you can pull it off in a different way, your own strengths, your own abilities. Like you say, even some of that, pumping up the tires of some players, telling them, that they might not be able to make that decision. But if you make them believe.
Yeah, belief is crucial. And that's what we spoke about the Sharks in probably 2015 and 16, definitely 16, about belief, believing in what the group that we've got. If we had one or two players that didn't really believe in what we're doing, it was never going to work, and everyone bought in. And I learnt that off Ricky. Ricky was, when he was at the Roosters, we had Freddie, Craig Fitzgibbon, Ricketson, Morley. It was a star-studded side. Minicello, every player was rep, Flannery, Crocker, Brett Finch, Craig Wing. It was just a ridiculous side. And so Ricky knew he had a good football team, but he made them believe that they were the fittest and strongest team. They could outgo. At some point, it was going to be a dogfight in the last 10 or so minutes. Ricky would send out a message basically, hey, we know this is us. We're fitter and stronger. We'll win in the last 10 minutes. And then, Freddie used to do something special or someone did something special and they'd win. But they had this belief, and their belief was about, we've got good football players, but we're fitter and stronger than everyone else.
How'd you go about instilling that belief or even advancing it even further? Because I look at belief, and it's an interesting word, but I would advance that. You optimise, like you look at a team like Penrith, they don't need to believe because they know.
Yes.
They know what they do works. And it's almost that advancement from belief. And it happens within playing teams where it's like, I believe. But now when we go and prove it, we've got the evidence to draw and say, hang on, I know we're the fittest team. How do you as the coach build those blocks of belief and then build that, well, guys, I know this. I know obviously you've been a Premiership winning coach, so you can draw on that example. But for those players, how do you tap into that?
Yeah, it's a tricky one. You tap into individuals and then get them as a group, like a big group, 20 players to believe. And you're exactly right. Like there's belief, but there's also to go to the next level, you have to have that experience that a coach can tell you that we're fitter, stronger, and faster, but then we need to get into one of those dogfights or get into a race. Like if you say you're the fastest athlete in the world, you need to at some point
go and prove it.
I've got to prove it, So at some point whether it's in trials or earlier in the season, you get your team and go, I've told you from day one, we're going to be fitter, faster and stronger. We're going to win this game in the last 10 minutes. And you sit up in that coach's box and go, I hope we win this game in the last 10 minutes because it's going to give us so much belief.
Yeah.
And, post-game, you go, hey, do you believe in each other? No, don't believe in what I'm telling you. Believe in each other that we can do this in this last 10 minutes because you just showed. And then that just builds confidence, belief, reinforces why you train so hard, your habits, behaviours, the culture, but you've got to go through those experiences. And we went through a negative experience last year. We just spoke about Parramatta. So that gives us hunger. And, we're trying to build belief, but sometimes you've got to have those disappointments to get to where you need to go.
Yeah, we've got the evidence we can get in the mixer.
Yep.
Now we've just got to advance that cause a little bit.
Because we had some really good wins. I remember early on we beat Manly down in Wollongong. Tom was on fire, just coming back. We beat the Warriors down in Wollongong. It was a pretty tough game. Sean Johnson and Adam Fanua-Blake, we jumped into them and made it really hard, and that gave us a fair bit of belief that we could do it. The problem is that we didn't do it consistently, so they're the next steps.
I'm smiling because I'm just thinking to like the athlete psyche and just how malleable it is and how the head coach and the leaders sort of can manipulate's the wrong word, but structure it into a way of like making you run through brick walls or making you think, maybe, you know what, I am the fittest I've ever been. Yeah. I know this would happen at certain teams where the coach would or the S&C staff would shorten the yo-yo test or the beep test so the scores are through the roof, and you're smiling. I think you'd be like, because we go off scores.
Yeah.
There's a feeling, but we look to scores. So if my score on the yo-yo test, that's the barometer of like if I'm fit. So if I've only ran 18.5, and then all of a sudden coach the S&C staff tweaks it and I run a 19, I am like, wow. Oh my God, I'm the fittest I have ever been. Guys, the evidence is there. We will get them in the 10 minutes. That structure of the psyche.
Yeah. Well, I think there's so many different things coming to it now. Like we have in-body scanners. We scan our players, every 2 weeks and, give them, muscle mass whether they're 45% or 50% of their body is muscle, and then, their fat content is 15, 18, 20%. They're dealing in numbers now, and then they see, and, they look in the mirror and they go, I don't mind what I'm seeing here, and it's just so powerful.
Could you...
We don't manipulate numbers, but I know what you're saying.
Could you have a player X comes in to get his body scan, and you already have you already have the scan that you've, manipulated to have a lower body part? Look at this, mate, you're flying.
Yeah. Oh, we don't, but I think, the players these days, we have different targets, obviously, for different positions, whether your height, whether your muscle mass, and, no one's the same. And we don't go, all our forwards need to be 50% muscle mass, have a body composition, fat composition of 17, 18%. We don't do that. And obviously, it's about height. It's obviously about how much your skeletal mass is, and and it's all done on percentages. But we give our players fair targets, because I think footy these days is, we don't want all the same. I'm looking at the moment, as our, maybe another middle that gives me something different. Like the thing that I loved about Andrew Fafita was that sometimes it frustrated me, but what I loved about him is every run was different. He didn't do the same thing twice.
Well, if you don't know what he's doing, me as a middle defender, I didn't know he's
and he'd run over to the left and he'd come back at the goalpost. Some days he'd run straight and hard as he could. He'd come off his left foot, he'd come off his right foot, he'd offload. He had all these things in his game, and I didn't know what he was going to do and how's the opposition, but that's exciting. And that goes the same with body composition. We all need to have some tall timbers. We need to have some Paul Gallons that are hard to handle, tackled low and can't get him to the ground, and strong. So if you get that right, all the different combinations in your team, you're a good chance of winning as well.
You sure are. We spoke a bit about leadership there. Obviously, Ben Hunt, the captain, leaves. Who do you envisage being the captain of the club, of the team for the next season and beyond?
Not jumping the gun. We'll make a decision, more around the Christmas time. Like, Damien Cook's not back just as yet. He turns up next week, and then Gutherson has been in, and we've got some boys that are in our senior leadership group. Have done a really good job over the last 12 months. Jack DeBellin, Tom Eisen, Blake Laurie, Murdoch Masilla. They've all done a really good job in different spaces within the club, and two experienced players that I was going to play week in, week out in Gutherson and Damien Cook. Which sort of leadership structure I have, I'm not quite sure. Whether they have, dual captains, a captain, a vice captain, I'm not quite sure. I'm not going to have 3 or 4 captains, but they're 2 leaders that I brought it to the club to lead. So I'd probably be silly not to look at them as captains of the club.
Obviously, I said earlier about the points for the Dragons coming from, or the lead up coming from Ben, and the finishing coming from Lomax, and obviously he kicked goals as well. And a bit of a change in the makeup of the spine. Are the Dragons going to be playing a different style of football to sort of suit the Cooks, the Guthersons, and whoever this new halfback will be? Is it going to be a complete revamp or a tweak?
Probably tweaked. Definitely out of dummy half, where we'll have Damien obviously can roll the ruck, where Jacob Little is more of a pass off the deck or run, just straight run. He's fast, but he's not going to roll. His skill set is not rolling the ruck and coming out one side and playing the other. So their skill sets are really completely different. I think they'll be on the field sometimes both at the same time. So they won't play both dummy half. Obviously, Jacob is a big body, like he's 94 kilos. He can defend in the middle as a 13 and just run a bit of, he'll just be more of a runner, 13 at periods of time, and Damien Cook can play dummy half. If we get an injury, both Jacob Little and Cookie can play out in the backs if we need to. So that's a good 14 for us. So we'll definitely play a little bit more flat and fast over the ad line with Cookie on the field, and then obviously with Clint, he'll bring his own skill set, and obviously he's really good at taking on short sides, 3-on-4s down short side, and he'll keep him honest down there. And our other halfback will have a look at what his skill set and design it. But I'd like to think our biggest change is around our 9.
Just on a personal level, to wrap up the chat of 2024, it's your first season back in a while. Did you like being back?
Yeah, obviously the year before I had at Manly. I love working at Manly, but obviously assistant coach sometimes, when you, I'm going home today, that's it. And being an NRL coach, it's never it until you close your eyes, and even then, a lot of stuff goes through your head during the night. So I do enjoy it. It's, if someone asks me, you can change profession at any stage, and do you want to do it? I'd probably say, no, I love doing what I'm doing. I'm definitely going to change this year in relation to how I coach. I think this year I sat back and there's a lot of things that I wanted to look at the Dragons and see how things operate, see how I can change things, and trusted in my 2 assistant coaches, which I still do. But I just think that I need to get a bit more hands-on this year, so I'll change a little bit that way. And I think every year you need to evolve a little bit and mix things up. So I don't know whether the players will like it as much, but I'm going to be more in their face this year.
What was it? What was the feeling like for you to day one to finally come back into that head coaching role, which I know has been an ambition for such a long time, and obviously faced a lot of adversity there and a lot of hurdles. But like getting back in, for you on a personal level, to be back in, I know you would have spoke about this before, but like what emotion particularly shone through?
Yeah, it was like I suppose you got to look back at the hard times, and there was some dark days. I was upset and disbelief, and I went through a period of time that I was going, why me, and what's happening here? Is this a bad dream? And eventually you sort of get past that, and then you start to look to, okay, right, I need to recover here and get back out of this hole that I'm in. And it took a little while, but to answer your question, I was, as I said, I feel that it's something I do when I do well, and I love doing. So to get back and get back at the Dragons, where I've had such a history with, I played with them, made my first grade debut with them, worked there for a little period of time. So, as a kid growing up, the Dragons were my team. Dad used to take me to Cogra Oval every week, and we used to watch them, the Rod Reddys and Craig Youngs of the world, and Brian Johnson, Mick Beatties, and all them, and Dragons were going through a pretty good period of time then. So, and then to coach the Dragons, Dad passed away 12 months ago, but it was after I got appointed the Dragons job. I'm not quite sure whether he was in a nursing home. I'm not quite sure if he knew exactly what was happening, but I was pretty proud that he was still alive, that I could tell him that I was coaching the Dragons. And he'd always because he struggled with me coaching the Sharks. He really struggled being a St George supporter all his life. He struggled with that. He got used to it after a while, and bits before he passed, it was good to be able to tell him I'm coaching the Dragons.
Well, when because it is a rivalry, and it means a lot to the people in the in those geographical areas. Did you feel like you had an extra point to prove because you'd given the Sharks their maiden premiership, and now you're coaching the Dragons? And I imagine some Dragons fans were like, oh, not the old Sharks coach, and also even the hatred towards you from Dragons fans from a couple of decades ago.
Yeah, I think it's more the Dragons fans because I was at the Sharks and we won the comp. So often I get people come up to me, they go, "That's the Sharks coach," and I go, "No, I was the Sharks coach," because I was there for 10 years and we won a comp. But look, most of the Sharks fans are whilst they're forgiving that I've traded, I'm at the Dragons, and they're forgiving because of the reason that we won a competition. Yeah. But the rivalry exactly, is intense, and it's what footy's about, I suppose. Those local rivalries, and when I first got the job, I couldn't wait for the draw to come out to find out when we're playing the Sharks. And I think we still do these days.
Yeah. I think that there was a comment you made. The Dragons had played, it was the week before in your post-game press conference, and there was almost like a slight jab over.
Yeah, I remember it. I remember it. And sometimes I get a bit, I don't get, it's not cocky, it's probably a bit emotional about it because, I was disappointed to leave the Sharks. But, things happened and moved on, and, I'm grateful for the opportunity I've got now. But, I had a bit of a jab at them, but it's all friendly. I've got some great friends there, a lot of the players that are still there, that I recruited when they were young kids, so, and I'll, as I said, I'll always hold a special place in your heart to win a comp at a club that's never won one. So,
but back to that comment, I'll often look at what coaches say in the build-up and the post-game, and great coaches have this incredible ability to shift the focus and the attention and off their players.
Yep.
And take it on themselves. Was that part of the reason or the rationale?
Yeah, and I look at coaches. Ricky's very good at it. Wayne, they're all really good at even creating a story for next week that they'll roll into next week about. Sometimes, that they, especially Stick will give it to his players about, their performance, and very rarely do they double it up the next week. So, you're always thinking about public perception, I think, sometimes in those things. But in the end, you're not worried about, Shane Flanagan, the coach. You're worried about your club and your team and protecting them. And I think that's definitely something that you try to protect your players because, in the end, I always, when I lose, obviously the players are out there and they've got that physical battle and they lose sometimes that physical battle or the skill battle. But as a coach, you're sitting up in the box and you take a lot of the try and take the responsibility of the loss or the performance away from the players because, you're part of it. You're a big part of it. So you've got to take responsibility or ownership. And if you can take that away from the players and sometimes clear their heads and get them ready for the next battle, I think it's if you can start Monday or Tuesday and not drag on to Wednesday and Thursday about last week's performance, I think it's a big advantage.
Well, I think in that particular instance, the talk was about Flanno going back to play the Sharks, not the performance of the Dragons a week before.
Well, I think that week, and I don't know if it was true that, the Sharks said not allowed to mention my name all week at training or anything. So,
it's these mind games.
For me, I was going, how good's that? Like they're worried about me. I'm not playing. I've got nothing to do with it, But, yeah, it's a tricky one.
Do you like the game within the game? Like, is that part of the attraction?
Yeah, it's an interesting one because sometimes you do and sometimes you don't. When you're on the receiving end of, some of that, and you don't win, it can become a bit personal. So you've got to sort of be very careful the message you're sending out.
Yeah. How much of that is the art of coaching? Like, what percentage would you put it at?
It's interesting, Jimmy. Like some of my mates that I might go for a beer with once a week have nothing to do with rugby league. So they square you up a fair bit. Yeah, they don't live in the space that you and me do about what was written in the media today, what happened on the weekend, form. This bloke's going to get the sack and all that sort of stuff. They don't live in that world, so they square you up pretty quickly. So I think that's a bonus that we've got to and. The thing that squared me up a fair bit is having grandkids as well. Like obviously you have your kids, and you're always they don't care when you come home whether dad won or lost. But when they get older, my kids are older now. They're the girls are in their 20s and Cole's playing, so it's not like they don't know what's going on. But your grandkids don't. Or you think you come home and all that they care is, mate, they sing. My young little Lenny, he sings the Dragon song whether we win, lose or draw. So. Yeah, you got to put it into perspective as well. That
it's funny when you come out of that bubble.
Yep.
and you go with like friends from other walks of life that, or like you say, with children, that it's a great way to just bring yourself off this pedestal of the rugby league or the NRL makes the world go round.
Yeah. I went to Melbourne a couple of weeks ago, and seriously, I could have walked down the streets and no one, you're just in another world, and like it's not that far away, and they've got an NRL footy team down there, and it's some of those things, and then you walk out, around Cronulla or wherever you may be, and you're in this bubble.
Yeah.
But you got to get out of it sometimes, and you got to remember that you're in a privileged position, but you're in a privileged position, and you've got to look after your teammates, your team, and your club, but in the end, it's just a sport.
Yeah, it's funny. I'm very close with friends who I went to high school with. There's about 10 of us still in a WhatsApp group, and I remember one year I was back to work and sent a picture of the gym.
Oh, yeah.
We're training, doing like a big session. And one of them said, "Lad, you do know I have to pay to do that?"
Yes. Or I have to go before I go to work.
And I was like, "Oh, shit." Okay. Yeah, fucking hell. That's I'm actually pretty grateful for this.
Yeah.
Now it was a quick snap back to reality, out of the bubble of some people are actually paying to use a gym.
Yeah, well, I've come through that period where it was non-professional when I was playing, and then at the start of it, it was I still had a plumbing business when I was coaching, and then I went full time in 2004. Sold my plumbing business, but I look back at those days. I spent all day on a shovel or my hands down a drain, or and I had some young boys work for me that were contracted to Parramatta or contracting that they worked all day and then trained at night. So things have changed, and some of the players of today, I know Melbourne do it, and I think it's maybe send them out for a day's work here and there could straighten them up a bit.
Yeah, well, it's just that idea that the world does exist outside the NRL, and
it's a great job.
It is.
It comes with its injury and loss, and the media scrutiny sometimes isn't great, but it's a pretty good job.
And the highs, the lows, the roller coaster, the adversity. For you as a coach, when you were facing those difficult challenges and that adversity, did you receive support? Was there like an avenue for, or an ability for the coaches union? I don't know if that's the correct phrase, but was there a support network there, or was it up to loved ones to be there for you and provide that level of support?
To be really honest, it was a really disappointing period for me from the game. As someone who'd been in the game all my life and coached, there was no support from the game. There's no coaches association. A few coaches reached out, but from the game, and to the credit of the game now, new administration, new CEO, and all that sort of stuff. But at the time, there was nothing, and it was basically fend for yourself, for your manager and all that sort of stuff. But it was tough. It was a tough time. But and from that, I've learnt that at different stages over the period of time, I've reached out to other coaches. I remember reaching out to Siebes when he's moved on from the Broncos, and there's quite a few other coaches that I've just sort of, whether they've been terminated or gone through a tough time, that and I've just reached out, even if it is just a text message that hey mate, I'm here for you if you want to have a chat, because it is a lonely place. It's a real lonely place, and I know the game is at the moment is trying to get a coach association. I know Trent Robbo's been involved with it, but it's taken some time.
Yeah.
Because we've seen in the AFL, there's been some unsavoury incidents. There's been some families, some tragedy within families, and touch wood, the NRL hasn't been too bad, but it's a space that we need to look after. Obviously, the mental health and just general health of coaches, and could be young coaches as well, and. It's a pretty tough job, or it's a dark place to be in if something bad goes wrong.
Well, we spoke about just previous about this bubble, this pedestal, and at times you come out of it, but the overwhelming majority of your life is spent in this arena of coaching. It's everything, and when that is no longer there, I often think back to my playing days and and mental health. Like my counselling session was the drive to training with a teammate or a couple of teammates. Like that was our counselling session.
Yeah.
Like that's, you know, when we think about like men talking and opening up to one another, that was it. It was in the car with Mick Innes, with Jacko, whoever. Like that was it. That was it was a counselling session. And
you're
opening
lucky
up
because you had that.
Yeah, and then it finished. And I imagine for you as a coach, or when you were coaching in that environment, you're so consumed and almost distracted. It's such a big part of your life, and you almost don't have time to feel those feels. And then when it finishes, it all of a sudden so much is taken away.
Yeah, like I always think about, you know, players leaving the club. You know, some players go to other clubs and their career carries on, but at some point, some players' career ends. And you know, you like to think that the game now, which it has, transitioned those players into work, and we're a lot better equipped. And I think as males in general, we're a little bit more open to talk about how we feel. If we have got some issues, I was just reading a story about Murdoch Masila, who's played 18 years in the NRL and Super League, you know, that he went through some tough periods of time, mental health, and, you know, no one knew about it. That's a scary thing that, you know, of course, you know, I'll use you for example, of course, James Graham is a tough front rower that you would put up a facade. If you didn't have that conversation on the bus or the trip to training, you would put on a tough facade when you got to training, because that's what your job is. You got to be tough, and you don't whinge. You get on with things, but then we're asking you to also express yourself if you've got any problems, or, you know, talk about your mental health. So that's against what we've been training you for. But I think modern day is that, listen, mental health is really important. You can lift the house in the gym. That doesn't stop you from talking about your mental health.
Yeah, and just being so fragile.
Yeah,
like that's at times, especially when I finished playing. That's how I was. It didn't take much to.
You know, and I see things about, you know, players with you know, young children that might have health issues. You see, you know, obviously there's, you know, relationships, marriages, and all that sort of stuff that you got to deal with, you know, and financial situations, gambling, alcohol. There's so many things come into it these days that a footy club's got to deal with.
I think sometimes, I'm thinking like to the coach's point of view, you're so consumed by having problems to solve, it almost takes away from, you know, it's that helps you having, you know, it's a sense of purpose. Which I know is a big part in mental health, like finding your purpose. Like if your purpose is coaching, that's like say that they're the counselling sessions, that's everything encompassed. But when it is no longer there, and it literally goes from one day you are and then the next day you're not, you find yourself with so much time in your hands, everything's taken away, and sometimes it's. I believe sometimes it's genetic, but sometimes it's environmental. And when it's environmental and then there's no support there, that's where it leads to some of the things that, you know, we've alluded to.
Yeah. I think it's like, it's not just in rugby league. It's about, you know, we talk about, you know, I see things about on the building trade, you know, builders and all that sort of stuff. They go through mental health issues as well, and, you know, how do they get support? But I think, you know, the best thing for what we're doing this year is talking about being the best teammate. And to be the best teammate, you need to be able to recognise things, talk about things, and, you know, if you can't fix them, find out and get some help. So it's something that, you know, we want to be the best teammate on the field, in the gym, all the way around it. But sometimes being the best teammate might be just asking the question about how you going, can I help, and so on. So, yeah, it's a tricky one because we've always just brushed that under the carpet and we didn't want to talk about it.
So you know, when you weren't coaching, and obviously you'd had that taste of success at the Sharks, and then and there was a period before you won the grand final. How did you fill your cup? Like what did Shane Flanagan do?
Oh, look, I was bitter, angry and all that sort of stuff. And then, as I said, over a period of time, I just sort of, lucky for I had my wife and, my kids were pretty supportive. And Kyle's like pretty strong mentally and, always support, pretty good support for me. The two girls have obviously, don't care about football as much. So, I was lucky I had all of them. And close friends, but how did I keep busy? It took a while for me to reconnect with life. Basically, I reckon I was 6 months or 8 months just in a bad shape, and then all of a sudden I just started, right, I've got to get going again, and started training, and then obviously doing some education stuff and getting my mind ticking over, being active was really important, and then basically saying, hey, I'm coaching again. I don't know when it's going to be, but I'm coaching again, and got back on that path. I coached PNG in the World Cup, then went with Siebes at Manly. That was all part of the process, and I'm really appreciative of Siebes giving me the job, because probably if I didn't get that job, I don't get the Dragons job, so that was important. So, but I just need to get back on the bike and go again.
Did that level of that belief or that knowing, that will, did it ever waver? Did you ever sometimes just think it's just not gonna?
Yeah, I did.
Come to fruition?
It was probably I had to cut myself off from the media as well. Like stop reading things and get on with this. That's not you, and just get on with it. But probably support around people, and that what we spoke about earlier about belief. When the comp doesn't happen by chance, and not pushing my barrow, but I've sort of whatever grade I've coached estuary ball, we won comps, undefeated comps for 2 or 3. Coached under 20s at the Roosters, we won comps. So like I've done it for a long period of time and had success in it, and I feel that I know it's a strength of mine to coach players to be their best. So I wanted to get back in that space, and it took some time, but it also you had to have faith in your own ability.
Mate, you've said that, about what coaching can do to you on both extremes. So that winning the comp with the Sharks and that connection that you have with those players and those men still. But yet, what the other side of it, you've seen both extremes. What draws you back? What makes you go, I want more of this? Knowing both ends of the spectrum.
The weekly grind of NRL getting players and challenging players to be the best they can be from a physical perspective and as a group excites me. And young men, whether I'm going to be the coach or someone else going to be the coach, need to be encouraged and I've taken enjoyment about seeing people succeed. Players, play Origin, play for Australia, win competitions. The weekend bit can be tough when you don't win, but the adrenaline rush and the satisfaction of you've just had a really good week and we've topped it off with 2 competition points on the weekend is contagious, highly contagious. And it's just something that just drives you week in, week out, that you want to win. And if you can sort of rub that into all your players and get them to feel it, that this is what we need to do. Winning is contagious. Sometimes losing can be as well, but it's sort of like a drug.
I was going to say, do you think coaching is addictive?
Yeah, it is for me. It is for me, and obviously then one of the side or byproducts of it is that the relationships you build, and obviously winning the grand final, 90% of those boys that played in that grand final, some of them have gone to England, some of them retired, but the connection, I'll have connections with them for the rest of my life. I still talk to them, 4 or 5 of them once a week, and it's something special.
On that that 2017 grand final win, 16, sorry. The last minute in the coach's box, like Melbourne were throwing more than the kitchen sink. They were throwing the bathroom sink.
Yep.
the ensuite sink, the lot. What on earth was it like for you in that box?
Yeah, I've seen the video. I had something in my pants because I didn't stop scratching down below, which didn't look real good. But I didn't say a word to any of the staff. I was just holding my breath for that period of time. The funny thing was, James, that all year we practiced this one thing. At once a week we did it we'd reduce ourselves to maybe 9 players or 10 players, and we'd have to defend. Sometimes we'd throw a number out there, 10 tackles. We got up to 20 at different stages where we just defend our line for 20 tackles or inside our 20-metre zone for 20 tackles against 13, and we'd just scramble. No one would turn out. No one would stop. It became habit, and we did it weekly, and thank God we did, because that was that drill in the last minute of the grand final. And some of the efforts there were crazy. I remember Jack Bird was playing right centre, and all of a sudden he bobbed up on the left, and Mick Innes and them were chasing. And from a coach's perspective, when I look back at that, not one player stopped. It was in the 80th minute, and everyone just kept moving. It was something we practiced all year, and the most important time of the year, something that we practice, won us a grand final, was really rewarding. And I reckon I didn't want to go any longer, but we showed that we could handle them. There's probably get back a few bad decisions from the Storm in that last set that they'd like to change, but from our perspective, we did a really good job about handling it.
Christian Wolf used to do that with us at St Helens, preparation for chaos.
Yep.
Like you prepare your team for chaotic situations.
Yep.
That there's going to be so many variables thrown at them. You just, like you said, don't stop moving.
Yep.
And turn up.
Yeah, fill the space and don't get behind, and just keep presenting. And when they get into your space, tackle them and
don't make the decision for them.
Exactly,
like you say, if you turn out, the decision is made for them.
Do your job, not someone else's job. There's so mmany different things that we had to concentrate on that period.
Force them into the error. Move, put the decision back on them. Yep. Don't make it for them.
It's funny, that grand final, that our last conversation before we went out is that Melbourne are really good from set pieces. Let's not give any penalties away. We kicked off and they trapped them about a metre out from their try line on the kick-off. And then Mick Innes didn't chase the kick-off. You probably watched Adrian Morley do it for the Roosters for his thing, and then just come from the clouds and took Jesse Bromwich's head off, tackle 2. And Gal said to him, didn't you listen to the last thing? And Mick Innes said, nah, this is the way it's going to be today. And so it sort of set the tone. But, that's the sort of group I had that, sometimes I might, rant and rave, but they were a senior and they, took things upon themselves, which I like. Yeah. But, it was a funny one.
That group that you talk about, I hear, and some of the fine arts of coaching, there was a meal in the build up to the grand final where there was an individual come, a sloppy waiter or some. The drunk,
the drunk comedian. Yeah. Went to a restaurant in Cronulla upstairs, and all the playing group were there, and some staff and the board and all that. And I think it was maybe the night before the grand final or lead into the grand final, and part of his, this comedian, I forget his name now, but he came up and he was a drunk, and he stood at the door ready, because we had someone, I think chairman was speaking at the time, and he stood at the door ready to start his act, and Jack Bird grabbed hold of him and said, mate, this is a private function, you've got to get out, and dragged him down the stairs. So there goes our act. Birdie dragged him down the stairs, but old mate explained to him, hey, no, mate, I'm on the comedian, let me back in.
Was he... Did he come into sort of like? Did he spray the group? Was he?
Yeah. And there was we got another bloke in there that sprayed the group. Was into Mick Innes, and we'd make sure that they would give him a bit of information, and sprayed our assistant coach Steve Price, and it was just it was something Steve Price actually brought in, and he said Wayne was really good about taking the pressure away from the boys. Like if you have a dinner or something the night before the grand final, it's pretty intense, like everyone's thinking about tomorrow and are they going to sleep? So let's change the story. Let's just take it all away from footy and have something that's funny and you don't even think about football, and it worked really well for them. We did it most years leading in the finals.
Yeah, I think that's a great ploy to have, that like just something to take the player's mind off things and a little bit of fun. It goes a long way in doing that.
We had some players that probably didn't need to have that. James Maloney and Birdie, we needed to switch them on, but the main group, I think, they really appreciated that they could just sit back, relax, and enjoy themselves, laugh, be with each other. And tomorrow's important. It's a big game, a grand final, but let's just sometimes you got to enjoy the ride. Yeah,
you forget that. You do. For next season with the Dragons, the draw is out now. I believe. What have you made of it?
We've got to buy round 3, which is early, but it is what it is. So we've got to make the most of that. We play. We've got 2 home games, one at Cogra and one at Wynn, the Dogs, and then South Sydney. So, you can look into the draw and dissect it and look at the positives, and you can look at some negatives. But it is what it is, and it's not going to change. So what I've learned, especially over the last couple of years, is things you can't change. Don't worry about them too much, and we'll make some real good positives and assess our draw. We haven't got any 5-day turnarounds, which is great. Got 2 or 3 for Thursday night games, and got some really big games at home. So against some, what I think will be semi-final teams. So. It's all looking good for us and excited about
it. The round 1 game against the Dogs, I don't know if it's a good or a bad thing. I think you'd naturally be excited about the Bulldogs Dragons rivalry, but also excited about round 1. It's going to come with plenty of subplots.
Yep.
How are you looking ahead to how you manage that?
Yeah, without a doubt. It's already started in my mind that, if we're worried about subplots, obviously there's going to be a few. Obviously one about Kyle and, what happened last time we played them. Excitement about how the Bulldogs finished their season, which was fantastic, and the season that they had. But I've got to change the focus about us as well. So that'll be the job. It won't start too early, but definitely in the back of my mind is how we get off to a good start against the Dogs and South.
As a father, how is that? Because obviously I've been involved in incidences where, the front page, the back page, and for me, I always thought, well, I'll deal with this. I'll crack on. It was more me worrying about immediate family members. You're in a different predicament. Obviously, you're the coach and the father. How did you navigate that?
Oh, it was terrible. Terrible for Kyle. I know he didn't do it, but the circumstances, I know how they can lead to a decision like that as well. But I've got to look at it both ways. But first, I'm a father.
Yeah.
And I always will be. And then second, I'm his footy coach. So there was a bit of a split approach to it, where I needed to look after him as his dad and protect him as much as I can, which is hard because of the media. But then all of a sudden, it switches around to, okay, we've got to deal with this from a football perspective now, Kyle, and let's get on with it.
Yeah.
So, it was tricky. Probably something that when I started coaching that I didn't know that I'd have to deal with, and coaching throws up so many different things, with players, and now I've got to deal with something that come up with Kyle, so that was tricky. Whether we handled it right or wrong, time will tell. Yeah. But I thought he handled it well himself.
Yeah. I think most footballers as individuals can. You're going to go. It's not a great feeling at the time, but with time it can pass, and you can not make up, but you can make positive headlines. You can perform well. It's within your control.
I think Kyle obviously dealt with it pretty well, and he's a mature young bloke, and he's always been well behaved, and he was sort of more worried. He was worried about him. I didn't do it, and the circumstances of this and so on. We all know, But then he started to, which the type of kid he is, well, he's not a kid, young man, that he started to worry about me, how it was affecting me, and then it went to the team.
Yeah.
So it was tricky. It was really tricky that, and he had this, probably a little bit of anger, disappointment, frustration because of himself. And then he had all this stuff around him, the footy team, dad's position, dad's coach and all that sort of stuff. So, it was more than just a player getting 4 weeks suspension.
Do you enjoy coaching your son?
I do, yeah. If you went to training and you didn't know his surname, you wouldn't know.
Yeah, if you took a stranger from a
know. So that's the way I look at it. I always look at it like that. And anyone comes to our training and they didn't know his surname, they wouldn't know the difference. And that's why I want to keep it that way. He gets treated the same at training. When he's at home, and completely different. But when he's there, he's one of the boys.
Is there any sort of rules at home with like there's no talking shop, or is it like it naturally navigates that way, or how do the dinner table dynamics work when he's over?
It's funny at the moment because Damien Cook gets in his ear about different things, and so Kyle, and Damien's smart. He gets to Kyle, so Kyle can get to me about different things, about days off, golf days, and all these things. So Cookie's been around for a little bit longer, and he's tricked Kyle. But to answer your question,
it's a good skill that to have to be able to
manipulate someone.
Yes. You don't go directly, go indirectly, and then.
No, it is a little bit different. We don't talk shop a lot, but obviously then we do also get to have a chance to talk because he's not one to come and sit in my office and have big long conversations. He'll go to my 2 assistant coaches and get information out of the defensive coach and our attack coach rather than come in and get it from me. He can get it from me later on at home and so on. So there's a little bit of a different approach in that sense. But as I said, you wouldn't know that he's my son at Phil, and his mum, his mummy's boy at home, so he gets what he wants.
Fair play. I think we all are.
Yeah,
we all are.
He's the only boy in the family, so gets what he wants.
Flanno, what is life like for you away from football? Can you switch off? So like the off season, and I know there was important decisions to be made, but would you say you're consumed by the game? It's always on your mind, or can you spoke about some friends there that you can get to, but what's it like being Shane Flanagan when it's not go time?
Yeah, I can switch off a little bit, and being busy, on the phone, whether who I'm talking to based around footy, I can do that without sort of rush. Oh, I'm on holidays. Oh, what am I taking these phone calls for? That's my job, and it doesn't worry me. Like I went away recently with the wife for a week, and one day there on a Wednesday, after the Ben Hunt stuff, my phone went from 7 o'clock in the morning to 4 o'clock in the afternoon, and I was more worried about what's happening with Kathy, with my wife. She's over there, sat there by the pool for 6 hours on her own. I'm more worried about her than thing. But it doesn't worry me, all that sort of stuff. I do like to switch off every now and again. Whether it's go and have a game of golf or as I said, maybe just go down to the local pub or golf club to have a beer and spend time. I've got 3 grandchildren now, so that's exciting. But they're all part of my footy career. I don't separate it. But it doesn't.
All right. Yeah. So it's
They know.
All, yeah.
Oh, Poppy's on the phone. They call me Poppy. Poppy's on the phone, or dumb out and on the thing. It just sort of everyone just gets on with it.
Like, or if a punter, if you're with the grandkids, and someone says, "Can we get a photo?" It's just Poppy's getting a photo.
Yeah. That's just it. Well, they don't come to me anymore. They grab Kyle. So, it's just part of just been done it for so long, and it doesn't worry me. All that sort of stuff.
You've obviously been involved in coaching for such a long time now. What advice would you give to any young aspiring coaches that are maybe looking to embark on this journey or just starting out?
You need to make sure that you're well prepared, and you're not, some coaches just want to think that, that maybe that the money or, being in the limelight is part of it. That's the least of your worries, like you have got another life, you've got your family and your own health, and that can be impacted. You've got to be ready and don't do it too early. I've seen a lot of coaches.
What do you mean by ready?
Time in the game. I see a lot of coaches, 30, even to a point, late 30s that haven't really coached. I think you should coach your own team at some point, whether it's reserve grade, whether it's under 20s, to get that experience dealing with people that, have had wins and losses, not selected, moved on, all that sort of stuff. They're the tricky things. Even parents, when you coach, I coached SG ball and building relationships with parents and understanding parents' expectations and, kids at school, not at school. So there's a lot go into it. And I think some coaches, don't realise all that sort of stuff. And then if they do get a job and they're in their 30s and it doesn't work out, they're finished at 40 and it's hard, they're not coming back. If you don't get that first bit right, if you're sacked, if your first year and you're sacked after 2 or 3 years, you ain't coming back.
Do you think it's almost, there's this romantic side to it of, that winning the Premiership, and people don't look enough at those little things that you just spoke about, the dealing with selection, re-signing, not re-signing, players, like there's some really life-changing decisions that you would be one of the major contributing factors in.
Yeah, there is.
In a negative way for some individuals, positive as well.
Yeah.
But also the flip side is
players not selected. Players you're not going to re-sign. That affects a lot of people, and you can't make those decisions lightly. But you got to make them as well. And whether it's about selection, whether it's about, as I said, re-signing or not re-signing, and there's a lot goes into it. But you got to be comfortable in that space, and after you've done it for a while, you can get there and be in a good support around you as well. But for young coaches, I just think that it's not a rush. When your time's right, it'll come. And I've got some. Dean Young's going down the right path. Ryan Carr's a little bit younger, but Dean Young's going down the right path. He's just recently been with Tonga, with Wolfie there. So he's been worked with me. He's worked up at the North Queensland Cowboys. He's done some Tonga, so he's going down that path. And I always say to Dean, his time will come. Whether it's in 2, 3, 5, 10 years, his time will come. And same with my other assistant coach, Ryan Carr. I think he could be a good coach, but he's 38, 39 years old. It's not, his time's not right yet, but it's hard to. They want to do it because they're out there coaching first grade. Maybe one component of it, they're coaching the attack or the defence, and they're dealing with a lot of things. As I said earlier, with Manly, I was assistant coach there, and I did my bit. And I packed my desk up in the afternoon, and I went home, and I didn't have to really worry about it till I went back to work the next day. That doesn't happen when you're a head coach.
When you say it doesn't happen with your head coach, it's like phone calls, or it is thinking about those potentially life-altering decisions, both good and bad.
Yeah, it's phone calls, but it's also, footy clubs are big club, a lot of people in them these days. We've probably got 20, 30 full-time staff at the Dragons. You got strength and conditioning coaches, you got welfare. There's a lot into media, marketing. There's a lot of involvement. There's a lot of people involved in it. So, a lot of them want a little bit of piece of the head coach all the time. They don't. So you've got to deal with that. There's the media side of things. There's recruitment and retention. And then the most important things, it's your players, like are you connected with your players? How are they going? There's relocation. There's all these type of things. The partners, whether they're having children. Val Holmes is a classic example. Val's been around the NRL for a bit, but he's moving from Townsville to Sydney. He's got to find property. His wife's about to have the second baby. They're going to have that in Sydney. Going to have that in Townsville. All those little things. How's that impact Val's training? When's he going back to Townsville? When's Natalia coming back to Sydney after the baby? These are all things that impact your footy team.
And it's impact the football team that the buck stops with you on I guess the impact of those decisions. So,
Val comes out round one and he's a bit underdone.
Yeah.
No one knows about the baby and
and
Townsville.
No one cares.
And no one cares. That's my job.
It's hugely important to that family and that unit.
And our football club.
And it trickles into the football club. But then you've got these supporters, these members, it's
all about 2 points.
Yeah.
Which we understand.
Yeah.
So, there's a bit to it, but you got to, if I didn't enjoy it, I wouldn't do it. Yeah. Seriously. If it was something that got me down and I didn't want to, in the morning I'd jump out of bed and still jump out of bed and go, okay, what's on today? We're on today, let's go, So that's exciting. The day I don't jump out of bed and don't want to go to work is the day that I go, let someone else do it.
Do you have a plan or a vision on how long you'll go for?
I think I'd like to coach for another 10 years or so. I want to win another comp. I want to win at the Dragons. I think post that, if I go into coach support, whether it was a football manager, just support young coaches or whatever it may be. But it's one thing I think these days, in however long it is, that I'd like to still be involved in footy and help young coaches, deal with a lot of different things. And I think that's probably one of the harder things. I had some people that, especially when I started coaching, that gave me guidance and pulled my, give me a clip across the ears if I needed one, or gave me some advice, Ron Massey, and, he was important for me, and then all the coaches that I spoke about earlier all had, big influences on what I do.
Matt, you said there about winning a comp with the Dragons. This the last one before we get into the 4 questions. What is it that the Dragons need to do? I think back to my time there, some of the geographical difficulties with Gong, Sydney, players, pathways. What is it that you think can help achieve that dream?
Yeah, I think your time at the Dragons was still Dragons finding their place. What I've tried to do since I've been there is, we're a big club. We're a Sydney club and we're a Wollongong club, and we go all the way down the coast. We're a big footy club, and respecting that, but also respecting the players, that some boys live in Sydney, they got families, and it is 45 minutes down and it's 45 minutes back. So respecting their time is crucial. So we've got a gym in Cogra now. We do a lot of stuff up in Cogra, like we train at Cogra Oval, which this week in pre-season, which I don't think it was done previously. It was always down in Sydney, so down in Wollongong. So, some of the Sydney boys, back end of the week, they have a Thursday off during the week and Sunday, but they wouldn't go back to Wollongong after Wednesday, so there's a little less travel, and those little things sometimes make a difference. I know my time at the Sharks that everyone was local and there was 10 minutes from home and they could shoot home if there was something happened, babysitters, whatever. So you got to take all those things into consideration, and in the end you want your playing group happy and coming to training with a real positive mindset. So we've dealt with that, and the club, 25 years just gone as one club, and I think finally, you have a look at our playing group at the moment. They don't know about St George and Illawarra. All they know about is St George Illawarra. 25 years. So most of our playing group are their whole life. It's been this one club. So you don't have to sort of explain to them where we've come from and the disconnect or the connect, whatever path you want to go down. So I think, and the board, obviously, St George Dragons, and then Win TV has been a really good marriage, and the board are really proactive about pathways and connected with our football program. We're getting a high-performance facility built. That's started now. It's just a little bit north of the Novotel down there at Wollongong. The club's in a really good position. I just got to make sure my job, I'm doing my job to the best of our ability, and we win footy games. And, I look back, and you've got to look back sometimes through your own experiences and draw on your own experiences. And in 2014, I wasn't at the Sharks, but they won the wooden spoon. You don't win it. You've got a wooden spoon under terrible circumstances. And then 15, we were one game off a grand final, and 16, we won it. And then, they've been pretty consistent, that club, for a fair period of time. So it doesn't take that long to turn it around, is my story behind that. And quality players, and then quality processes and system and coaches will get it done. So, I think we've got the facilities are coming, which is a minor part of it. I think the coaching is there. My high-performance staff are, I think, the best in the business. And then assistant coaches, we're in a good space. Players, we're getting some top-level players to our club. And our junior pathways, I've got some of the best young kids in the country coming through. So I've got to develop them to be first graders. And I reckon 2 or 3 of them will play first grade this year.
Yeah, well, it's looking promising, especially it was an immediate impact. And we spoke at the top of the show about the so-called experts or the bookmakers had Dragons at wooden spoon and proved all them wrong. And look, I know success isn't an escalator up necessarily, but it seems as though the Dragons are on the right path. We'll get into the 4 questions each and every guest. A dream spine, no rules, just a 1, 6, 7, 9 that you admire, you like.
Well,
you don't need to have coached.
I always loved Billy at fullback. I thought he was, he obviously changed the game. He was so competitive. It's all going to be a Melbourne spine here, so you can probably fill it in. Cooper Cronk, Cameron Smith, and Munster, like that.
You take Munster in there, yeah, nice.
That was something we played that side in 2016. They were the spine for Melbourne, and we had to counter that spine. Yeah. Billy was out. Munster played fullback, I think. But the challenge for me as a coach, and I was always is to beat that best team, and they were always the best team, and I always wanted to be very similar to Melbourne, and they had 4 quality players. Probably 2 or 3 of them are going to be immortals. Cam was just, and if you look back at 16 grand final, we targeted him. He made 70-something tackles in the grand final. Because I'd watched that much Cameron Smith, and how do you stop this bloke from just controlling a footy game and getting his team around the park, making good decisions? And one thing I know about anything is fatigue gets the best of everyone.
It does. Makes cowards of us all.
Yeah, so we had to fatigue him, and we had to get at him, and we did a good job at that 70-something tackles in the grand final. Just took the edge off him.
I like that. If football didn't exist, what do you think you would have done? You said you had a plumbing business.
Yeah, I had a plumbing business. So I had probably about 5 or 6 plumbers working for me, which was interesting. Different days.
Which was easier, managing plumbers or footballers?
Yeah, it's all the plumbers weren't that hard to manage, but after our calls that things weren't done and water was leaking down someone's roof or something, that was tricky. So I'd probably still be doing the plumbing business, but I never planned on doing the plumbing thing. It was just something after post school I went to, and I didn't mind. I had some good customers and enjoyed it in the end.
A sliding doors moment that you think about?
I don't think I've had too many myself, but I've had a lot from a coach's perspective, like sliding doors, Des going to the Bulldogs and Michael Innes being there and not wanting him. That was a sliding door moment for my career, getting Michael to come to the Sharks.
Wasn't it just?
James Maloney, at the Roosters and them not wanting him, and then we get him. They were Luke Lewis leaving Penrith, going to South, not really wanting to go to South, and it ends up with us. There were some big moments, those type of things. Wade Graham, I signed as a young kid out of Penrith, but I got sent these questions. They were probably three real important sliding moments for my career.
Yeah.
Because we ended up winning a comp, and as a coach, if you win a comp, you're pretty lucky, and it sort of holds you in good stead for the rest of your career. So they were three big signings and three sliding door moments that helped me.
I guess some of those variables that are out of your control, if a different coach sees Mick as, the future captain, and he was the captain, and, why wouldn't you keep him? Same with Maloney.
Yeah.
Luke Lewis, there was uproar when he left Penrith.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They all added so much different. Like James I'll put him down as a gamer. He delivered when it come to game time. He didn't deliver too much else bar problems and the comic side of things at training. He was good to have around, but and then Mick was such a pro. He was just. I still talk to him regularly. He was just so great for what we needed. And I remember signing Mick, and Gal was obviously there, and Gal and Mick had some big run-ins during the thing. And Mick was captain of the Dogs, and Gal was obviously captain of the Sharks. And Gal sort of said, "Oh, it's going to be interesting, him coming, but I want him,
Yeah.
Let's get him." And when he came, it made so much of a difference. I think, him and Louis, from external players, they made the biggest difference. The Gals and all of them were in the place, and they made the biggest difference.
Final question. Who's the most interesting person you've met in your life so far?
I've mentioned earlier Ron Massey had a big influence on my coaching career. Like, he worked with Jack Gibson, had a bit to do with Jack when he was alive, and just sort of didn't know I was going to go down this coaching path, but they sort of set me on that track. And probably someone that's most interesting person, I can't mention his name, he works in Australian Special Forces, that's done some work with us, and he's still active at the moment. Like, he's been on 5 trips to Afghanistan. He's got one of the second highest bravery awards for Australia, and just sitting down and chewing the fat with them about their life, about, he spends like 6 weeks in the jungle in Singapore training Singapore Army, and he's got a wife and he's got kids, and I just love, that's something that just fascinates me, and I love talking to him about it. And he's done some leadership stuff with us, because obviously and he did leadership for us when we were at the Sharks. I actually worked for the Sharks for a while and had a couple of years out of the military, but his dedication and passion and attitude towards life and his country is something that really inspires me. Like, his love for his country and his family and where Australia's going is something like, I go, well, I need to have that for the Dragons.
Yeah.
He does everything for his family and his country, not himself. And I just think that's something special, to put your life on the line. You get a lot out of that.
I like that attitude. Yeah. All right, Flanno, it's been great to sit down, catch up. Much appreciated. Thank you. I'm sure our listeners will thoroughly enjoy that. And thanks for everyone here at the Bar for joining us, mate.
Been a pleasure. Thanks, James.